Like most boys my age, 17, many afternoons were spent in my room playing Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto 5 with my friends. This was a typical Saturday afternoon for me. Sadly, this changed drastically because of the secret my family kept from me. I'll reveal the secret later in the video, so keep watching. During dinner one night, Dad mentioned that he and Mom had to go away on a weekend trip, and I'd have to spend the night with Grandma. I'm 17. Why can't I stay home alone? Because you're not 18. This is not a debate. You will be staying with your grandmother. Staying at Grandma's changed my life drastically. I'll reveal how later in the video. You really better keep watching. We arrived on Friday evening at Grandma's. She hugged me and told me there were freshly baked cookies in the kitchen. Thanks, Grandma, I said as I hustled towards the cookies. I grabbed a handful of cookies, and as I headed towards my designated room, I heard Grandma say something that piqued my interest. Dan, you and Laura need to tell him the truth. I know, Mom. We will soon. It's been 17 years. Dad kissed Grandma goodbye, and she closed the door. I tiptoed to my room. I couldn't help but wonder what secret my parents were keeping from me. Early next morning, Grandma knocked on my door and told me she had a few errands to run, and then she had her book club meeting to attend. She said that breakfast was on the table, and she left money on the kitchen table for a pizza. She kissed me and said she'd be back around 5 p.m. After breakfast, I searched Grandma's house from top to bottom for clues. Maybe this was the reason Mom never liked me at Grandma's. I didn't see any weird documents on any box or drawer at Grandma's. After a few hours of searching, I gave up. I ordered pizza and watched some old horror films. That night while in bed, I heard something creak in the hall. I slowly opened my door and peeked into the corridor. Grandma was pulling a staircase from the roof. I couldn't believe I hadn't noticed that before. I watched as Grandma walked up the stairs and returned a few minutes later. She retracted the staircase, then went to her room. I needed to get to the attic. I waited about half an hour until I was certain Grandma was asleep before I went into the corridor with my phone in hand. I noticed the little ring on the ceiling and pulled on it. Once the stairs were down, I quickly went up the stairs and turned on the flashlight on my phone. Grandma's attic was spotless, so it was easy to look through the stuff. I saw a small box marked Zane's First Videos with Mom and Dad. There were 3 VHS videos in the box, and I took them. I heard something downstairs and decided that was my cue to leave. I snuck back downstairs, retracted the stairs, and went back to my room. I hid the videos in my backpack before I drifted off to sleep. The next afternoon, Dad picked me up. I kissed Grandma and told her thank you for having me. When we got home, I greeted Mom and went to my room. I hopped onto my gaming system and asked any of the guys if they knew anyone who could burn VHS tapes to DVDs. My brother does it all the time as a side hustle. He charges $2 per tape. How many tapes do you have? Leo asked. I have 3, and I need this done ASAP. Do you think I can bring you the tapes tomorrow and collect them the following day? Sure, no problem. Hey, are you 2 lovebirds finished? We came to play, so let's play, Phil said. The next day I handed Leo the tapes and paid the fee, and the following day I collected my tapes and the DVDs. As soon as I got home, I pulled out my portable DVD player and slipped in the first DVD. It was a man and a woman cooing over a baby who was laughing and giggling. Could this be me? But those aren't my parents. I watched the first 2 videos, but the third video had me shook. In the video, the mom and the dad held baby Zane and told him how much they loved him. They told him he was going to live with Aunt Laura and Uncle Dan. I turned off the player. I couldn't watch anymore. Aunt Laura and Uncle Dan? I quickly called my grandmother. Grandma, there's something I have to tell you. I admitted that I'd snuck into the attic and stole the tapes. I also told her what was on the videos. Grandma was silent for a while before she answered. I hoped that your parents would have spoken to you about this. But you asked, and it isn't fair to lie to you. Your birth parents, Diane and Matthew King, were bank robbers. Your mother, Diane's sister, decided to adopt you as her own since she and Dan couldn't have children of their own after they were incarcerated. As soon as your parents get home, please speak with them. Grandma and I chatted for a few more minutes before we hung up. As soon as Mom and Dad got home, I told them I wanted them to watch something. They both sat on the sofa, and I pushed the DVD into the player. I pressed play and watched my parents' eyes widen. Mom jumped up and pressed stop. Where did you get this? The more important question is, why didn't you tell me you weren't my real parents? Zane, Mom said hesitantly, we wanted to do what was best for you. We live in a small town, and if anyone knew who your real parents were, people would judge you based on their bad decisions. You had no right to keep me from my parents. My parents trusted you, and this is how you repay them? Is this because you couldn't make children of your own that you're keeping their only children from them? Mom looked like she was about to slap me, and Dad immediately jumped up and stood between us. I stormed into my room and locked the door. I was going to find my parents if it's the last thing I did. That night, I searched the internet and saw all the bank robberies my real parents had committed. I found out which prisons my parents were located in, and I decided to visit them. The day I visited my birth mom, my hands sweated profusely as I waited by the table for my birth mom to come out and greet me. I saw a woman walking towards me, and I recognized her from the video. I stood up and greeted her before we both sat down. Hi, I'm not sure what to say, I blurted out. I quickly told her everything, and she listened intently. That's quite a story, but Laura told me that my baby boy died from pneumonia when he was a baby. I can't believe you were sitting here. Well, we can do a DNA test just to be sure. With tears in her eyes, she agreed. I just wish your father was here to see you. He died about 3 years ago. We talked until it was time for me to leave. I wrote a letter to the warden and asked if we could do a DNA test, and he agreed. Once permission was granted, the warden organized a doctor to do our DNA test. I thought this was the end of the road for me. But when our DNA test showed that she couldn't be my mother, I had more questions. She squeezed my hand as tears rolled down my eyes. I hope that you find your mom. I thanked her for everything and left. I locked myself in my room for 3 days. On the 3rd day, I heard a soft knock at the door. Zane, it's Grandma. I opened the door and pulled Grandma into the room and locked it again. I stood there and hugged her for about 15 minutes before I told her what happened. Zane, you need to tell your parents what you found out. There must be some sort of mistake. Grandma opened my bedroom door and beckoned to my parents and retold my story to them. There must be some mistake, Dad exclaimed, confused. While Grandma and Dad tried to figure out the mystery, Mom stood in the room and didn't say a word. Mom, do you know who my real mother is? I am your real mother. I took care of you for the past 17 years, and this is the thanks I get? I repeated my question. Mom didn't answer. Laura, is there something you aren't telling us? Laura, Grandma said. It's been 17 years. Zane deserves to know who her real mother is. Mom's eyes darted around the room before she broke down in tears and confessed everything. One afternoon, when Zane, the real Zane, was about 5 months old, I picked him up from daycare and went to the mall. I'd usually pick Zane up last, but that day I picked him up first. He was asleep, so when I hopped out of the car, I didn't think anything was wrong when he didn't make any noise. After a few hours, I came back and Zane was dead. Between tears, Mom told us that she drove to the bad side of town and took me from a homeless woman who was sleeping. After Mom finished talking, the room had an intense silence as Grandma, Dad, and I tried to come to terms with the news that we just heard. Without saying anything, I pulled on my sneakers and walked out of the house. I couldn't believe I was raised by someone who had kidnapped me. I walked until I got to the pier and I sat on the dock. Everything I thought about the last 17 years of my life was a complete lie. Around midnight, Dad found me and sat next to me on the pier. After a few minutes, I placed my head on his shoulder and he hugged me. Zane, I'm so sorry that you had to go through this. I didn't know that Laura had switched you. What kind of a father doesn't know when their baby is switched? If you want help finding your birth mother, I'll help you. Are you ready to go home? How can I face Mom knowing what she did? Mom was taken away by the police after you left. She agreed to give herself up. Grandma is at home and she's very worried about you. I nodded. Okay. The next week, I went on national TV and told my story to the world. I knew it was a long shot, but I was willing to take the chance. Dad stated that a reward of $5,000 would be given to anyone who gave information that led me to my birth mother. Within the next few weeks, I took dozens of DNA tests and chatted with hundreds of people who claimed to have a lead, but they were all dead ends. After about a year, I decided to give up. My emotions took a huge hit, and I just couldn't do it anymore. One day, while Dad and I were home, someone came and knocked on the front door. Dad opened the door, and there was a teenage girl.
Hi, good afternoon. How can I help you?
My name is Brittany Klein. I'm looking for Zane McAllister. Dad called me to the door. Hi, what's this about? I think you're my brother, but I can't tell Mom until I'm positive. Dad ushered her into the house, and we sat in the living room to talk.
What makes you think Zane's your brother?
When your story first came out and Mom saw it, she cried really hard. I didn't understand it at first, but about 3 months ago, she admitted that she was young when she got pregnant and her parents put her out. She said she fell asleep with you next to her. Suddenly, you were yanked from her hands and the lady jumped in her car and sped off.
Son, I know you've been through a lot, but I think you should do a DNA test.
I nodded. Immediately, Dad called the doctor and asked if she could do an emergency visit. While we waited, Brittany told us she was 13 years old and had a 9-year-old brother named Daniel. After about 30 minutes, the doctor arrived. Brittany handed the doctor her mother's toothbrush and the doctor swabbed me. The doctor told us she'd have the results tomorrow and left. She thanked them for their time, gave me a number she could be reached by, and left. Grandma came by the next day to lend emotional support. The doctor dropped off the results at about 2 p.m. Dad looked at me.
Are you ready?
I rubbed my hands nervously and nodded. Dad opened the document and read it.
It says here that you and Brittany's mom are a 99.9% match.
Grandma screamed and hugged me. I called Brittany and told her the good news. Dad and Grandma agreed that tomorrow we'd have a little party and invite my birth mom and my siblings. At 3 p.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. Grandma answered the door, and Grandma led them to the living room where there were balloons and a small buffet laid out. I walked into the room slowly. Mom? The lady turned around with tears in her eyes and walked towards me. She hugged me and cried. I don't think there was a dry eye in the room. After a while, she pulled away. My name is Lucille. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. I'm sorry it took so long to find you. When I heard your story on the news, I didn't know what to think. I think we should make a toast to Brittany, the person who made this all possible, Grandma chimed in. We spent the rest of the afternoon learning about each other, and my birth mom told me that she'd named me Tyreek. She stated that after I was stolen, she used that as motivation to get odd jobs and get off the street. Eventually, she found herself an apartment, got married, and had kids. Her late husband passed away about 5 years ago, and she never told him she lived on the street or that her baby was stolen because she was ashamed. Lucille, you were able to rise from a devastating situation, find love, and start a family. You are a woman of strength, and I'm happy that Zane has you for a mother. Grandma hugged her. Grandma and Dad grew to love Brittany and Daniel as their own, and my birth mom became a beautiful part of our family. I'm thankful for my family, and I'll never take them for granted. If you have a family that loves and cares for you, tell them you love them today, because tomorrow is not promised to anyone.
My wife has never been normal. She was the most beautiful girl in my whole university when we were both still students. She was studying business management, the same thing I was studying, and we even happened to be in the same year. From the first day I resumed, I noticed her immediately. Who wouldn't? She had the most silky smooth ebony black hair I had ever seen. She had long, beautiful legs that she always showed off by wearing short skirts and gowns. The most melodious voice, a voice that could melt even the hardest of hearts. She was also very intelligent and could contribute to almost anything being discussed, no matter the subject or topic. So it wasn't a wonder why everyone wanted to be with her, especially the guys in my class, who all competed with each other for her time and attention. Strangely enough though, she never seemed to be interested in any of them and turned each of their advances down. I had a crush on her, but I thought that I stood no chance. After all, almost every guy I knew liked her too, and so I didn't even want to try to compete for her attention. So it was a surprise to me when, one day, out of the blue, she sat down beside me in class and struck up a conversation with me.
Hey, I'm Marie. What's your name?
Surprised and visibly shaken, I began to stammer. I had to give myself a couple of seconds to relax before I was finally able to answer her. My name's Samar.
Oh, Samar. That's a really nice name. I don't think I've ever heard it before. What are you reading?
She pointed at the book in my hands. Oh, it's just a book about the human mind and how it functions. I'm kind of fascinated with how the mind works.
Then you should be studying psychology, don't you think?
Maybe, but business is my first love. Psychology comes after that. We talked about psychology for a little bit before switching to other topics. After our conversation, I learned that she wasn't just intelligent, but also extremely funny. She asked me to lend her the book after I was done with it, and I did. She also had various books which were of interest to me, and soon we were exchanging books amongst ourselves, while also discussing various topics and enjoying each other's company. We soon became close friends, and very soon we started dating, to the bewilderment of everyone who thought I didn't stand a chance with her. After a while, I began to hear strange rumors, particularly about her. Rumors about her not being who she said she was, and rumors of her having some dark secrets she didn't want anyone to find out about. But I dismissed all of this as just lies and jealousy. Jealous people will always make up a lot of things to make someone look bad. After college, we still stayed together and soon got married. She founded a beauty and cosmetics company and grew it from scratch to become one of the most successful and profitable businesses in the country. And almost every single household had at least one of her beauty products. It was after a few years of marriage that I started noticing it. The things they warned me about in university all those years ago. There was now something different and darker about Marie. She was no longer the sweet lady everyone knew. From her domestic help to her pets and even random strangers, it seemed like a screw had suddenly gotten loose in Marie's head. I wondered why and how I hadn't noticed this a long time ago, and I was amazed at how long Marie was able to hide her true nature from me. One fateful day, we had a function to attend, and I was already dressed up and ready to go. But as usual, Marie was still taking her time to get ready. It amazed me how long she always took to get ready for an outing. I had to ask her something, and usually I would wait until she had gotten dressed. But this was time sensitive and couldn't wait, and so I barged into her dressing room. And there she was, still seated on a stool and applying one of her numerous beauty products on herself. But then I noticed something. To find out what I noticed, why don't you click the subscribe button so you too can notice when a video is uploaded. I noticed that there were a lot of beauty products lined up on her enormous dresser, but not one of them had her company's label. How strange was it that the owner of a multi-million-dollar beauty company didn't even use her own products? This is strange, I pointed to all the beauty products on the dresser. Not a single one of your products in sight. Why is this so?
A lot of reasons.
Marie replied without looking at me. Like what?
Well, for one, they are made of harsh, harmful chemicals.
Even the anti-aging cream?
Especially the anti-aging cream. Do you want me to age rapidly?
Then why do you use it in the products that you sell to people? I blurted out.
Well, why do you think? Money, of course. It's far cheaper to use these chemicals, and by using them, we're making twice the amount of profit we usually make.
All this for money?
Yep.
I was distraught by this and told her that I wasn't going to tolerate it, and I was going to leave her. But all she did was laugh in my face.
You can leave, but you'll be leaving with absolutely nothing. You'll lose everything you've ever worked for, and for good measure, you'll be spending between 5 to 10 years in jail.
How is that possible?
Remember our wedding contract that you signed? Next time, read the fine print.
Since I was working in her company in a senior position, I decided to sabotage it and try to expose the company from within. But all my efforts proved abortive. That was until I met Sharon. Sharon was also a senior executive within the company. She had also found out about the shortcuts the company was taking and the harmful methods, practices, and products it employed in the manufacture of its products somehow. She had a personal vendetta against the company as her mother had gotten severely ill as a result of prolonged use of the company's products. Her mother tried to sue, but Marie employed an army of lawyers to suppress and bury the case, and her mother was frustrated at every attempt to get justice. She was finally offered a measly settlement out of court to keep her mouth shut, which she reluctantly accepted. Sharon figured out what I was trying to do and offered her help. We joined forces together, and soon enough, we had achieved our aim. The company was exposed for its practices, and Marie was arrested, tried, and sentenced to jail. While she was in jail, I was able to initiate and conclude divorce proceedings to divorce from her without me losing everything. Because in her strange contract, Marie had a clause that I could get out of the marriage with everything intact if she went to jail. I was happy to have gotten out of the marriage, and I and Sharon settled down. After the collapse of Marie's company, Sharon persuaded us to go into business together. I would provide the funds for the business while she was the owner and ran the day-to-day activities of the business. After thinking about it for a while, I agreed to it, and the business began. Very soon, the company, which manufactured and sold luxury clothing items, grew and began to bring in much profit. And as the profits rolled in and increased, so did Sharon's irresponsibility and reckless spending habits. She soon began spending every profit the business made, instead of reinvesting a portion of it back into the business for it to continue to grow. And as expected, the business began to suffer losses, which she aimed to rectify by reducing the quality of the materials used in the clothing items. She did this for a while, hoping no one would notice the drop in quality of the clothes. But I noticed the drop in quality and threatened her to rectify her issues, or else I would withdraw my funding. While managing the struggling clothing business, she also opened up another business, a food and snack company targeted towards children. The initial profits from this food business were through the roof, and I was happy when I saw the financial reports of the business. So I decided to dig a little deeper, and what I saw astounded me. It turned out that the reason the profits were through the roof was that she used little to no actual real food stuff in the making of the products. All she used were cheap chemical substitutes that cost very little to acquire and which were certainly very harmful to children. "What do you think you're doing?" I shouted at her as I threw the papers containing the shipments of the cheap chemicals she used to make the foods and snacks.
I'm making profits, Samar. That's all that matters. Do you think these kids or their parents care if the food is real or just a bunch of chemicals? All they want is something that tastes nice, and that is what I give them.
So you don't care about the effects or how harmful it is to the children?
Not really, no. And the effects are not immediate. Most of them won't even start showing any symptoms till well into their adulthood. By that time, they would blame it on something else.
Wow, I never knew you were like this.
Don't be so childish, dear. Almost every big business does this.
It doesn't mean we should. We're not like them.
Well, Samar, you know what they say. If you can't beat them, join them. I couldn't beat them, so I became them.
I stormed out of our house and went for a drive in the city. I needed to be somewhere calm and away from Sharon in order to cool off and collect my thoughts. I finally found a quiet place and I stayed there for hours until I had calmed down before I returned home. For the next few weeks, it was a series of constant battles between Sharon and I. I tried all I could to make her see why what she was doing was not just unethical, but also heartless and reckless. But it seemed like no matter how hard I tried to convince her, it only made her more determined to continue on this path.
Why stop now when we're making the most profit we've ever made?
She was not the same kind-hearted woman I knew all those years ago, who was ethical and helped me take down Marie's company for endangering the lives of its customers. She was now a greedy, money-hungry, and money-obsessed woman who would do anything at all to make money. She was now the very thing she tried to fight against all those years ago. All this constant arguing and fighting about ethics soon put a strain on our marriage. One day, while I was out on a business trip, I got a call from the hospital that something had happened to Sharon. I rushed straight to the hospital and found her lying in a hospital bed with a respirator. As soon as she saw me, she began to shed tears. I sat by her until she stopped crying, and she said that she had to tell me something. I'm listening. What do you want to tell me?
Samar, I just wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. I've been doing something really horrible for the past couple of months.
What is it? I asked, now curious.
Every day for the past 2 months, anytime I cooked your dinner, I would always introduce a foreign substance into your food. It was meant to weaken you as time goes by before finally putting you in a coma. I just couldn't risk you hindering my business profits. I'm really sorry.
I paused for a long while before I finally opened my mouth to speak. I know what you've been doing, and I secretly switched our meals so you were the one eating the food meant for me. She was speechless and could do nothing as I walked away from her and out of the hospital. She soon fell into a coma and I took over her business. I resolved to do things the right way, and soon enough, the business grew. Profits also grew. I opened different branches across the world, and I didn't have to employ any shady or harmful business tactics or practices. If you enjoyed my story, please like and subscribe for even more stories like this.
Metro Cafe. Oh, how I loved this place. The melodious sounds they played, the ambience, the lights, the food, the city, the country. I could just sit tight, right in my position for the rest of my life. I didn't need to experience any other thing. I didn't need to be in any other place. I didn't need to see anywhere else ever again. I had everything, I'd seen everything, and I'd experienced everything right here in Metro Cafe.
Good day, beautiful.
I heard a dream-like voice. I was so lost in euphoria that I didn't know if what I was experiencing was real or not.
Good day, beautiful.
The voice persisted. I took in a deep breath and sighed. Maybe it wasn't a dream after all. Maybe the sweet voice I was hearing above me was not God, but a person, trying to talk to me in the real world. I took off my glasses and looked in front of me. There was a godlike guy standing right in front of me with a huge, apologetic but flirtatious grin that extended from one ear to another. He was beautiful. Could it be an attractive waiter trying to tell me to get my legs off the table? I thought for a moment, then quickly dislodged my leg from the table. But he still stood there with that angelic grin on his face. What did he want now? Wait a minute, didn't that guy look a little bit familiar? I looked up again in shock, and this time, he came closer, looking me straight in the eyes.
Good day, beautiful.
My heart stopped beating for a few seconds. Hi, I'm so sorry. I tend to get lost in my thoughts most of the time.
No need to apologize, Phoebe. I get lost too. I guess that's why we both like this place. It helps us think.
Yeah, you're right. Wait a minute. How do you even know my name?
I have my ways.
He told me with a boyish grin, but I wasn't going to fall for it. I stared at him coldly with a stern, curved brow, and he immediately broke.
Okay, fine. I've seen you around a few times. No, I've seen you around a lot of times. All the time, and I
couldn't help it. I burst into laughter immediately, forcing him to pause. Yeah, continue.
I kind of forced the waiters who'd been attending to you to tell me your name. I'm so sorry. I'm not a stalker, I promise.
I laughed some more. I knew this guy, maybe a little too well. I'd seen him almost every time I came to the cafe, and our eyes had met at least 70% of these times. Initially, I wished that he'd just get up and talk to me, but he never did. I gave up on the idea and stopped daydreaming about a relationship with him. I was definitely not going to ask him out, so if he didn't think that I was attractive enough to get up for, we definitely didn't have a future. So what's your name?
Huh?
Since you know my name, don't you think it's fair to also share your name with me? The truth is, I actually knew his name already. I'd forced the waiters to tell me his name, same way he did.
Oh yeah, right. I'm Andre.
He said, stretching his hand forward for a handshake. I shook his lovely hands, not knowing that that was the beginning of the end. In the future, I was going to fall in love with Andre, this lovely billionaire, and he was going to destroy me, literally. Watch till the end to find out how things went. And if you're still watching till now, it means you're enjoying the story. Hurry up and like and subscribe so you don't meet someone who'll ruin your life. Andre was very vague and mysterious, but this only added to his appeal. He never wanted to go into too much detail about his life, but there was one extremely obvious thing about him that he couldn't hide no matter what. His shoes, car keys, phones, and clothes already gave him away, so I wasn't surprised when he finally confirmed that he was a billionaire. I think he waited till he was sure that we were head over heels in love with each other before telling me about his money. I didn't care about him being rich at all, but the truth is, being a billionaire was a huge plus. The Christmas and New Year holidays finally came to an end, and I had to leave my soulmate and Paris. Such a tragedy.
Don't look so sad, honey. I promise to call you every single day until I'm finally able to visit the States.
Are you sure? I asked with tears in my eyes.
I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you, Phoebe. I love you with everything in me.
I love you too. We exchanged the few contact details we hadn't bothered sharing while we were in Paris and hugged again before I got on the plane. Andre didn't disappoint at first. He called me every single day, and sometimes even 2 to 4 times a day. We were so in love. Unfortunately, this only lasted 1 full month.
after which Andre disappeared into thin air without any explanation whatsoever. I discovered that I'd been, in fact, ghosted. Andre was my one true love. Our love was the type that only happened once in a lifetime, so I couldn't give up on him so easily. I tried all I could, and I would have even traveled to Paris with stolen money from my parents if my dad hadn't caught me. Andre was gone. I neither saw, heard from him, nor about him for a long while. It was almost like he suddenly stopped existing. Sometimes I secretly prayed to God to keep him safe. I hoped that nothing bad had happened to him. Years passed, and it was so difficult to move on, but everyone kept advising me to start dating again because I was aging rapidly. They were right. I wasn't getting any younger, so I had to finally move on from my one true love. I decided to give love another try, and lost in thought, I started crossing the road. I didn't notice the car until it was too late. I woke up in a hospital, and a drop-dead, gorgeous man was staring down at me.
Oh my God, she's awake! Doctor, nurse, hello? Stranger, are you okay? How do you feel? I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to hit you, I promise.
What was he talking about? Am I dead?
No, and thank goodness.
Oh, really? But you are so handsome. I thought you were an angel. The handsome stranger grinned shyly. Okay, I know you've guessed it at this point already. The accident was caused by fate. The handsome stranger, Ethan, became the person with whom I decided to give love a try again. And guess what? He was also a billionaire. We had a novel-type relationship for 2 solid years. But everything changed when we decided to take a love walk one fateful evening. We were walking past a street where homeless people resided when I saw Andre lying amongst them. My heart leapt from my chest and my feet followed quickly after. I forgot about Ethan, who was walking beside me, as I ran towards Andre. Andre? Andre! I ran to him and tried to hug him, but he pushed me away with so much power.
Who exactly are you, woman? Stay away from me before you lose your jaw.
Andre! It's me! Phoebe! He looked at the floor.
Woman, I have decided not to look up again. But if you make me do that again, you won't like the outcome.
His voice gave me the chills, but there was no way I was going to give up. I tried to touch him again, but Ethan stopped me and took me home. I couldn't sleep for days after this incident, so I went back to the street with Ethan, only to hear that Andre had moved. I searched everywhere with Ethan until I finally found the street where Andre had migrated to. Andre was still hostile with me and kept screaming that he had no idea who I was, until Ethan tapped my shoulder and told me that it was time to go back home.
You said your name was Phoebe?
Yes, do you remember?
I really don't know who you are, woman, but for some reason, that name gives me déjà vu. Do you have an extra room at home that I could stay in, perhaps? I think that spending some more time with you will definitely help me remember you.
Of course! I can give you a place to stay!
What? Hell no! That's not happening!
Come on, baby. He's an old friend and he's suffering so much. He might have even had an accident and lost all his memories. Do you really think that I'll be happy with myself if I leave him here?
Wow, so it isn't enough that I helped you with a manhunt for someone who you suspect to be an ex-boyfriend with amnesia. You also want me to approve of him living in the same house with you?
Please?
Fine, but he can only stay in the guest house at the back of your house.
Deal. Andre kept observing us carefully while this discussion was going on. It was almost like he knew something.
So I can pack my bags? Don't pack anything, just follow us.
Andre's horrible stench enveloped the car we came with on the ride home. We put the windows down to reduce it, but it didn't really change much. He smelled terrible. Andre was looking so poor, slim, and haggard. I took care of him to the best of my ability while trying to get him to remember our past, but he never could. He just used me as a get accommodation quick and free card. I didn't mind, though. Every second spent with Andre was still magical, just like it was 4 years ago. Ethan didn't like Andre one bit, so he kept treating him badly. I confronted him one day after Andre complained, and he confessed that he was only behaving that way because he felt so threatened. He suspected that I'd eventually leave him for Andre, so he wanted to make Andre so miserable that he would decide to leave by himself, whether I wanted him to leave or not. I assured him that nothing like that would ever happen while we were still together, and that I was only taking care of a friend. There were no strings attached. We both knew that this was an obvious lie, but we had to believe it because the last thing I wanted to do was hurt Ethan, who'd been nothing but good to me. My dad offered Andre a job, and Andre became kind of a part of our family. But the silent feud between Andre and Ethan never died down until Andre decided to quit and work for Ethan instead. Are you sure that this is a wise decision?
It's the only way I can become friends with him.
Okay. Another year passed, and Andre's relationship with Ethan improved drastically. They became good friends, and Andre even moved into Ethan's apartment. I was happy with this new development, but something never felt right with me. After spending 1 year with Andre, I started to suspect that he was lying about not remembering me and knew exactly what he was doing. But whenever I confronted him with my suspicions, he simply laughed it off. Fortunately, my suspicions were confirmed when Andre finally revealed himself as a secret agent, working undercover to infiltrate and bring down a terrorist organization. He stayed homeless with the people in that area because they all worked for that evil organization. And this was how he was able to infiltrate and become a part of it. But everything changed when he saw Ethan with me. He explained that he remembered me immediately, but didn't want to get me in trouble. So he pretended not to know me. He had to come stay with me, though, when he saw Ethan, because Ethan was the leader of this terrorist organization that he'd been trying to bring down for years. This was what made Ethan a billionaire, and he was using my bank accounts and personal information to run illegal deals without my knowledge, putting me in trouble with the government. It was going to be easier and take a shorter amount of time if he brought down the organization from the root itself. Ethan didn't like Andre because he knew that Andre knew his secret, and Andre didn't like Ethan because he knew that he wasn't the best man for me. Andre had to pretend and gain Ethan's trust, though. Once he did, and Ethan let him in, he busted him. I was so hurt and annoyed with Andre, but forgave him when he explained that he never wanted to ghost me. But sometimes the nature of his job needed him to change his identity and become a ghost without notice. It took a while, but I finally forgave him, and we rekindled our love. Andre chose a safer job. We got married and lived happily ever after.